And we're doing something completely different. We are actually in a chapel service, and we are here for the Eastern Kentucky Holiness Camp, and we are playing live on the radio for the local radio stations that we've been on the last couple days. But it's completely different, but we do have a guest here today, a local gentleman that we've met this morning and had a chance. We've got Kevin Graham, and actually we've got Waylon Graham as well. Good to have you guys with us.
Thanks for having us.
This is going to be interesting, but we're going to do what we can do. And for our local listeners that are on, it may sound a little different than what you hear on a normal Saturday afternoon at 2:30. And if you're just hearing this for the first time, join us every Saturday at 2:30 on the local radio here, because we're going to be here, and unless you're listening, we're kind of wasting our time. But Kevin, you're born and raised here, and I believe, and you've kind of worked out of the area, but you're back in and really working with family. Why don't you give us a little bit of your history, a little bit of this area, because I'm new to it.
Well, I'm 38 years old. I was born and raised in Wolfe County, which is just a few miles north of here. I was raised, on a farm. When I graduated high school, I worked for the State Highway Department in several counties in the 10th District here. And my wife and I, when we met, she was going to school and getting her doctorate in psychology. And once she got out of school, I started doing some construction work for natural gas pipeline companies. And we both worked, several hours from home. And once we had kids and we realized we were spending so much time away from them, and they needed us more than, us just waking up every morning, dropping them off at a grandparent's house or a family member's house. And my wife's current position allowed us to use her benefits and allowed me to come, back home and help on my family farm. And then we've got farms and properties that we've been able to purchase together and trying to get them established. And together while we were working on the road, we started doing some short-term rental houses, and that kind of that opened a lot of doors for us with the tourism that's started into the Red River Gorge in the last few years. And we just I was able to quit my job 4 years ago, I think.
Okay.
And now we have beef cattle and have the Airbnbs and just basically use the land.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good time to be in the beef business. That's it kind of worked out well for you as prices raised up. It's good for the beef industry. A little harder on some of the families, but it is a good time to be in the beef industry.
Absolutely. The last few years with the cattle prices have, it's definitely been a blessing.
Yeah.
It's opened a few doors for us and allowed us to expand and just another source of income for our family.
Well, it's interesting because you did that for probably one of the best reasons, was to be with your kids, be with your family, and be able to do that. That's more important than most people will ever know. And there aren't many single income families anymore, and that's not what you're doing. You have two incomes. One just happens to be where you can spend the time with your kids. But the times of dad's going to work and mom's staying home doesn't happen very often anymore. So when you get to spend that time, because when you're out on the tractor or in the truck, and if your kids aren't in school or gone, they're out there with you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Tell us about this area, because I'm new to it. We did, I think I told you, we went. Our kids told us when we came here to listen carefully for banjo music in the hills. We haven't heard it, but actually a lot of people that have never been here only know the stories we think of, the Hatfields and McCoys and things like that. And we did, I think, we saw Bloody Breathitt, something about Bloody Breathitt on a plaque in town when we were here, and it talks about, I guess, some of the things that went on. So it's some of the things that we heard of over the years of this area were true. Most of them passed now. But tell us about you're farming some of the stuff that's old reclaimed coal mines, and that's historical a big part of the history of this area. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, I consider this area as kind of the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. You can go an hour north of here and you're kind of in the bluegrass country. You can go an hour south of here and you're in the mountains. We've got a lot of, creek bottoms and, hills and hollers, and the topography is definitely, steep, and a lot of it's laid on its side. If we could get a roller and just flatten it all out, we'd really have some property. But
yeah, acreage doesn't really count the same here as it does in the rest of the Midwest.
no, but it's beautiful and it's home. I wouldn't live anywhere else. But yeah, my father and I, when I was young, he purchased a piece of property that was an abandoned strip mine, and it was one of those properties that anything we did to it was an improvement to it. So, we went in and cut a lot of brush and fenced the property from scratch. There was nothing there, and we were able to, start raising some, heifers up and just slowly grow our herd as we could afford it. And that property is just, it's mind-blowing how much it's changed over the years, because, we've just constantly, everything we've done has helped the place. And it's been a great place that we've been able to spend with our kids, to enjoy the outdoors. We raise cattle up there in the summer, and in the winters we're checking on them in their cabin and things, and we hunt up there a lot. And we've got a lot of, scattered small properties that are, 100 to 150 acre plots. But out of 100 to 150 acres, you may have 20 or 30 of that's feasible pasture land. So
The rest is just fun.
the rest is just fun. We get to deer hunt, turkey hunt, and things like that.
Yeah, what do you, we talked about that. You've got 3 kids. You got Waylon, and I thought this was interesting. I think I remember, because I would never be able to remember 3 names of kids. Waylon, Cash, and Loretta.
Yes, sir.
Country western. Now that plays into this part of the country.
Yeah. Well, I proposed to my wife on Loretta Lynn's front porch. So our last one, our 14-month-old daughter, she was
Really?
named Loretta.
Well, and you did get a chance. Your son actually got a chance to record in Waylon Jennings' old recording studio as well.
He did. We took a trip close to Nashville back in the spring, and my wife booked a little adventure thing at one of Waylon Jennings' recording studios. And it was privately owned, but they kind of had it set up similar to how he did. And it was a location that he liked to go and write a lot of his music. It was just a peaceful place for him. And we got to go in the recording studio and just kind of sing karaoke, and then they sent us a file of our recordings. And we've had some good laughs out of that while we're driving.
I asked Waylon today if we could play that, and he said no. So I thought we were going to get him to do live, but he won't do that either. So I couldn't even get him to put a mic in front of him this morning. But you get to spend a lot of time with your kids because of what you're doing, and that's more important. Again, someday you'll know, you'll actually see how important that was. I mean, you see it now, but someday you'll see that as something so much more important. And our world has lost that. Our world has lost fathers that are in the home. Over 50% of the families in our country don't have a father in the house at all. And I think it's about 80% that they figure don't have a father that's connected and spending time with their kids and pouring into them, which is a really sad situation. So your choice to leave the world of working outside, and it's kind of nice when you have the same paycheck coming every week, and everything else, all the insurance, all the benefits are there. But the trade-off is well worth it. You'll never regret that. Yeah. Listen, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to start talking about some hunting and with your kids and with yourself here, and then and we'll move on with the program. But in the meantime, we're going to take a quick break. Adam's going to come on, and he's going to share who makes the program possible, and how people can come alongside us. And for right now, we'll be taking that break, and we'll be right back with God's Great Outdoors on the Trail to Adventure. Welcome back to God's Great Outdoors on the Trail to Adventure. Again, we are here in Jackson, Kentucky. I always want to say Jackson, Mississippi, but we're in Jackson, Kentucky, and it is beautiful country. Linda and I thought, we were looking at the map when we came over the other day from Virginia. We thought, that's not very far. It won't take us too long. Distance here means a whole different thing than in the Midwest when it's dead flat. So we have some Ohio people here that can see to the next state from their house, literally. So it's a different part. I suppose if you're on top of one of your mountains here, you can probably see to the next state.
Yeah, there's a location just south of here. I think you can see a couple different states there. You can see Kentucky and Virginia. And,
A long ways to the bottom and back up again.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, you and I talked on the phone the other day when we were talking about what we were going to do here, and you did talk about that you do love to hunt, and there's some great hunting opportunities here. And why don't you share with us what you're hunting? And then we also talked about when you do go with your kids, you talk about the value that God adds to it, and how to give him thanks for what he's providing for us.
Absolutely. Well, we talked earlier about, fishing lure business that Waylon here started, and we like to reload our own shells, and we like to start from scratch as much as we can, and it just allows us to appreciate what we're doing more. We know what we're shooting, and we have a lot of small properties here, and, we get to scout them out in the fall, early fall, and when we find a place that we really want to hunt, we put a lot of time and effort into it. Some places, we'll try to bait some deer in, try to figure them out, and just spending that time together, trying to understand how the animals are acting and how they react to our scent coming into the area once we start traveling it. It's a lot of fun, and I'm learning as much as they are too, but, we always start out with, making sure that we thank God for all the blessings that he's allowed us to enjoy, while we're here, and even from our farm animals to the wildlife. They're here for us to help manage and do the best that we can, learn from. And, when we start a hunt, of course, like I said, we put a lot of work into it and a lot of time. And, it's just, there's so much anticipation that leads up to that opening morning hunt. And last year, I remember we were setting, we have a cliff line that we hunt, and there's a gap between the two cliff lines that the deer, constantly cross. And we knew there was a good buck in there that we wanted to harvest. And we got kind of back in a cave where we could watch that crossing. And Waylon and I were sitting side by side, and, it was really early before daylight, and, it was just so quiet. And we just took that time to bow our heads, and before the squirrels started making any noise and the birds started chirping, and we just sat down and said a real quiet prayer between us, and thank God for the ability to be doing what we're doing and spend time with nature, and to bless the hunt basically. And
yeah, it's there's so many parents that would never think to do that. And we have, there's nothing that we have that isn't provided by God. And it's a special time. Linda and I hunted a lot where we sit side by side in the hills of South Dakota, similar to these hills, except there's very few trees.
Yeah.
It's the same topography. But we get to spend the time there and wake up in the morning. When you watch God's great outdoors, wake up in the morning. It's a special time and a special place, and we learn to appreciate it, so much more. But why don't you tell us a little bit about we talked about the fishing lure business and why you're doing it with your kids and kind of how it got started, because I think what you're doing is such an important thing that we don't pour into our kids. Most people don't. They don't take the time. And it's very important, and I think it's very interesting. I just did a program with Al Linder a while ago, and Al started out building in school, probably junior high, started building lures, and actually has done very, very well with it. And I hope the same thing for Waylon. But why don't you explain that to us?
Well, it's hard for my kids to see the full benefit in the cattle because, that provides for our whole family. They help a lot, but it's hard for them to take complete control and manage it themselves. Of course, all of my kids, they have cattle that they claim, and when they have babies, they all get excited, that their cow had a calf or whatever. But our local extension agent there in Campton, she contacted us and wanted to do a program with the youth and, like an entrepreneurial experiment. And they wanted to have like a a small business that they managed, and kind of give the kids some time to think on it. And Waylon came home and had let his mom and I know that he had seen somebody on YouTube or something make fishing baits, soft plastic baits, and that he was really interested in it. And I was like, son, I don't have a clue. I don't even know where to start. But my wife, she's so outgoing. She just kept reaching out to friends and was asking, other outdoorsmen when we were, at baseball games and things. And finally we ran into a mutual friend that knew a guy in Salyersville, which is in McGoffin County, just about 30 minutes up the road. And he had a mutual friend that made soft plastic baits, fishing worms and things. And she set up a date and time with this guy, and we went to the firehouse where he was the fire chief at, and he set up a nice little demonstration and had a microwave to melt down the soft plastic material, and had all the molds and the injectors and all the safety equipment. And we set up and took time to actually go through the whole process and learn how it was done. It was really neat. And I was like, I was amazed. The whole time I was like, man, that's what we need, another project to do in our house. But I was asking the guy later, I said, so to get started, what do we need to do? Like go to a website and buy a starter kit or whatever? And he said, well, I'll just sell you what I've got. And I thought, man, there's no way we can afford what you have here. And he said, well, I'd like to keep a couple of these molds just for myself. But he said, I'd like to see him be able to do well with it too. And Cassie and I were kind of talking, in private. We were like, there's no way we can afford all this stuff. And finally I was like, well, what will you take for it? And he said, I'll take $230 for everything that I've got here except for these 2 molds. And I was like, okay, we'll take it. And we'd kind of talked, we wanted to spend a little bit of money on getting both boys started on a little entrepreneurial program there. And that was our way of getting Waylon started. And we, just a few weeks after that, at our local extension office, they set up like a day where the kids that had their own little program there, where they could set up a booth and sell their merchandise. And both of my boys did very well.
Really?
Which we had to stay up a couple nights up until early in the morning making.
That's small business. So Waylon, did you pay him back the $230?
Sadly, no.
Well, and that goes right along. Really, as we look at life, we have a responsibility to instill things in our children, and you're teaching them how to run a business. Hopefully, he's learning profit and loss, and there's more profit than loss eventually. And but it's very, very important. But it's also important to instill those same things of the Lord, of the things that He gives us, the value that they are, and give Him thanks. And there's something that showed up, and I'm going to read this because I got a bio from you, and I'm sure you don't carry a bio around in your wallet or your pocket very often. But I got and our listeners out here in the audience didn't hear this. But there was just one thing that really struck me here because and you did share with me that it is your wife that wrote the bio, but that's not unusual, trust me.
Absolutely.
And it's better to have somebody else do it than do it yourself because it either sounds really bad or it sounds like you're full of yourself. But this is it was very good, and she did this. And I just want to read this because there's something very key here biblically. And it says that Kevin's wife likes to joke that Kevin has never met a rusty old piece of equipment he couldn't find a use for. A testament to his resourcefulness and knack of seeing potential where others don't. And when I read that, and this is when I called you. I actually called you on accident. I mean, I pushed your number instead of a different number, but it worked out great because you picked up. But what I got from that is that seeing something in something else that nobody else sees and doesn't see any potential. But that's exactly what Christ did in us. The world looks at us, at all of us, and can see us as very little. We all look at others, and we might not see their value. And some people don't see any value in themselves, but what Christ sees in us is amazing. And He saw enough in us to send His Son to die for us. And you've got sons and a daughter And can you imagine watching them die if you had to, and you could give your life, you'd do that. But would you give up your son or your daughter for somebody else? I couldn't.
It's hard to imagine, isn't it?
It is. But Jesus, I mean, God did that with his son. Jesus came specifically for that reason. When I read that part of your bio, that's basically the exact same thing God did for us. And it's that made me think, man, we could do a really good program because God showed me that immediately. So you need to thank your wife for that. But it's true. But why don't you give me a little bit more of the ages of your kids, the things that you see in them, that you see the value in those kids. That might not be an easy thing, but even, I see Waylon doesn't talk much, at least not here. I bet that's different.
Wait till we get in the truck.
I tried to put a mic there, but he wouldn't do it. But just, why don't you give us a little bit of just your family information, just what you see in your family and the value there.
Okay, well, I'm very blessed. I have an amazing family from my mom and dad. They did an amazing job raising me and my sister. And then I have a wonderful wife, Cassie. She's actually from here. She was raised just a mile or two down the road. And like I said, I've said my whole life I would never live in Breathitt County until I met her. And it's one of my favorite places in the world. It's finally home to me. But my wife, Cassie, and I, we have 3 kids. Waylon, who's 10 years old. Cash is 8, and then baby Loretta, she's 14 months old, and she's been such a blessing. We had a long road getting her here, but she's
really
been such a blessing.
I love the story of where the name Loretta came from. My wife actually had an aunt that lived right down the road, so you probably had to drive past where she used to live to get there. But I love the way that you named your kids, and we get that. As you said, you have Amish in your area, and you have friends that are the young you've become, and a lot of their names are biblical names.
Yes.
Yours are country western singers, but they've got some great songs and some great meaning in them as well. But we're gonna have to take a break here and end the radio program. We'll still be on the live radio, but for the recorded podcast, we're gonna have to recorded radio. Sorry, we're gonna have to step away from that. We'll pick up in the podcast in a minute. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Waylon. He nodded his head. That's as much as we're going to get out of him, I think, today. So, but thank you to our listeners for joining us. We're excited to be here every week, and we're here hopefully not just telling you a story, not just entertaining, but sharing a message of what God has done for us. And thank you for joining us here with God's Great Outdoors on a Trail to Adventure. We'll join you again next week. Thank you. I need to go back because I didn't push my recording button when I started. So I just need to record my entrance again. People on the radio, you're just going to have to stick with us for a second. So we're just going to go back to the beginning and you might not have to say anything, but welcome to God's Great Outdoors, the Trail to Adventure. This morning we are in Jackson, Kentucky, and we are at Eastern Kentucky Holiness Campmeeting, and we are with 2 special guests today, and we've got Kevin Graham, a local gentleman, and his son Waylon, who isn't going to say anything, but he's smiling and nodding. So that's all I really need to do. I'll use that to plug into the other. So the radio portion is over. We're going to move to the podcast in a minute. I'll ask you some more questions. We'll talk some hunting and fishing stories or whatever. But I'm not sure how we're playing Carl on the radio. When does the actual live radio? I'm not sure what we're doing there on the end. So
they'll cut it off when you want to cut off.
we're done with the radio port, with the live radio. They are? So we're talking on the radio, I guess, right now. I've never done live radio, so I guess we did live radio the other day. We're going to go to the podcast. You ready?
Absolutely.
Welcome back to the Trail to Adventure podcast with God's Great Outdoors, and we are again in Jackson, Kentucky, and we are in Breathitt County, right close to the edge of Wolfe County, aren't we? Is that right? It's all new to me, so I'm not really sure, but it's beautiful country, and I would say something interesting. Carl Yoder here that got me here originally took us for a ride the other day, and we went into some very unusual places, a lot of narrow valleys going up roads, and we went up Bloody Creek. Is that where we went? Bloody Creek. And I asked someone that actually grew up there, how did that get its name? And he didn't have any idea. I said, maybe we don't want to know. But do you have any idea?
Probably an old political vendetta or something.
Really? So that really is, those stories are true.
To the best of my knowledge.
Well, it's beautiful country. I got up in there and I expected to be cattle everywhere. And I didn't see any cattle up that way, but I think the two they're not towns. Two little spots along the road are Flat and Mary, correct?
Yes.
Do you have any idea how they got their name?
No, I'm not very familiar with, like, I grew up in the same county, but I'm not real familiar with the.
It was very interesting. We turned around a couple places where I was glad we turned around and came back out before we got any further in. But you love to hunt, and you've hunted up in this country all your whole life, I guess, since you were old enough to go. But what's your best hunting? What's your favorite hunting story of you or your kids or with your dad or anything? Was your dad a hunter, or is he a hunter?
Yes, when my dad was growing up, there weren't any deer in this area, and I guess they brought them in here and released them just like they have the elk. Mm-hmm. And when he grew up, they didn't see really many really nice mature bucks. They were really small, and I think there were a lot of hunters too, so they were harvested pretty quick. And but growing up, my dad didn't. He was a farmer and didn't really get into hunting a lot, but he spent the same time with me and tried to teach me safety and a lot of the moral values of hunting and being in the outdoors. Mm-hmm. But that's something that I've been able to spend a lot of time with my kids, and it's just been very valuable time, and they've learned so much, and I have too.
Yeah.
But we've got so many stories because something always happens on a hunting trip. Taking a safe shot, and we've got a few missed stories, but
Waylon, have you missed some?
A lot.
Big ones?
Depends.
Well, I grew up, and not many people grew up down here. They probably do, but a lot of the country. I grew up squirrel hunting, mm-hmm. and I grew up walking behind my dad, in my dad's steps behind him. And I remember sneaking up one time, and I'm sure I was dragging my feet in the leaves, as a little kid probably would. And this impacted me. This impacted me probably as much as anything I can remember. I'd stepped on a twig, and my dad usually would have glanced over his shoulder with a, "What are you doing back there?" Look in his eyes. And my dad turned around and he knelt down in front of my feet, and he picked up my feet and he showed me where to lay my feet in his steps, and how to set my foot down so it wasn't noisy. And I'll always remember that because it taught me it's exactly what God does for us. He shows us where to place our steps.
He sure does.
And if we pay attention, it's a life lesson that never goes away. And really, we need to pass that on to our kids. Show them, first of all, we have to live that out. Our responsibility is to live it out as fathers. But then to continue to live it out so they can see our footsteps are where God wants them. And that's so important. And as our kids get older, my kids have their own kids now. And their kids are old enough to have their own kids, which is hard to believe. But the importance of walking in the steps that God has set forth for us is more important than you'll ever know till your kids are grown. And that's one of the stories for me that I remember so vividly. And I was probably Waylon's age at the time. So I learned that, and that stuck with me. So that puts me at almost 50 years ago that my dad did that, and showing me where to place my feet. And I remember one other time he and I were walking. It was a fall day. The leaves were changed, and there was wet leaves on the ground, and that smell you get when the rotting leaves come in the fall. And we were walking in the evening, and we were walking down a 2-track road in the hills, and I'm short, obviously a lot shorter than him, and he quickly knelt down and he put me on his shoulders and he stepped up and he said he wanted me to see what he could see. And he wanted me, and there was a buck chasing a doe, just a little four-corn buck. We weren't deer hunting, we were bird hunting and squirrel hunting. But that's another thing that stuck with me, that he wanted me to see the vision that he had for what laid ahead, sorry. And that's so important as fathers, that we have that responsibility to our kids. And we can do that as well in the outdoors. My life has been in the outdoors, but it's so important.
I can relate walking behind my dad with holding a flashlight for my dad.
Yeah. Well, and that there's a situation where you helped him, but that casting that light, over the last few days, we've talked about evangelism and casting that light as Christians so others can see it is so important. But it's I couldn't trade those things. That's why God has me doing what I'm doing. And that's why God has you with kids at home, that you have that responsibility. And that's more important, as I've said that several times, that's more important than you'll ever know until someday when your kids are at that age. Yeah. And I challenge our listeners, where we're at, what we're doing, our kids are watching us. And if we're not walking in the steps where God wants us to walk, they're going to walk in those steps too. And if we're walking in the wrong steps, they're going to walk there. And we're going to be held responsible for that someday. So I just challenge our listeners to pay attention to where you're going, pay attention to where you're walking, where your steps are taking you, because your kids are going to see it. And someday you're going to see that they took that lesson if it's the right lesson, and you're going to see that they took the lesson if it's the wrong lesson as well. Thank you for joining us today. It's been good. It's been I think that I've learned a lot about the area. We got so much out of Waylon, out of his testimony here and his experiences. He did finish a bottle of water while we're here, so that was good. We got something done. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
It's been great. Thank you to our audience. We got an audience out here today for the first time ever. They didn't. We must not have said much funny because I didn't hear them laughing. But we're gonna sign off with God's Great Outdoors on the Trail to Adventure. We hope that you'll join us here each week as we travel down that trail to adventure in God's Great Outdoors.